Okay, we're recording? Okay, it's 7:01. I'm calling the meeting to order. My name is Robert Blank. I'm the acting chair, vice chair of the Land Use Committee, standing in for Carl Stryker, who should be joining us by phone shortly.
That's right there.
Oh, he is, yeah, it's not.
Okay, I think we can get to the first item on the agenda, and I think the only item on the agenda is City of Yes. And I'm going to defer to City Planning to make its presentation.
Hi, thank you so much for this. I'm just getting my presentation to full screen, but
The sound is a little tinny.
okay. Hold on one sec. Let me just mute myself and then come back in.
Yeah, because I could hear.
Hold on, let's figure this out.
Is it something with the camera down here?
I think I can hear her through like Ursula's computer.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Just to see another audio.
I can hear you through Ursula's computer.
Well, it's not on microphone.
We'll just try that.
Ron, are you still there?
Check 1, 2.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm just connecting with my Bluetooth.
Okay, looks like we figured out the audio visual issue. So without further ado, go ahead, City Planning.
Sure. Okay. I haven't connected my Bluetooth, so I'll just do it like this, and then I can use my Bluetooth for Q&A if that's all right. Okay. Perfect.
That's fine, Brennan. Go ahead.
Okay. So share content.
Yeah.
And can everyone see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to minimize this so that I can get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Brenna Hemmings. Thank you so much for allowing me to present on this item to the Land Use Committee for Community Board 12 in the Bronx. So I'm from the Bronx office, and I'll be presenting on City of Yes for housing opportunity. I'm joined virtually by Elizabeth Hamby from DCP as well. She will be on hand to help answer any questions that come up during Q&A. So with all that being said, I can start. And let me know if you can see if you can see the slides and if they move as I'm presenting.
Okay. And Brad, if you don't mind, one of us will raise our hands if we have questions during the presentation, if that's okay, if you don't mind yielding questions during the presentation.
Sure, yeah, that's totally up to you. And if there's something that I'm explaining that you'd like me to spend more time on, or, just would like more clarification on, please take the opportunity.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's your board. Can you imagine if I was just like, no questions? Okay, so I'll get started. Let me just do that for a quick second. So as I've said, I'm here to present on City of Yes for housing opportunity, and it is a citywide text amendment that will change zoning to allow for a little bit of housing to be built in every neighborhood. So one of the reasons that we are doing a little bit of housing in every neighborhood is so that there's not a dramatic change in one neighborhood that's bearing the brunt of all of this development, of all of this housing production that could potentially happen. So next slide. One of the reasons that we need more housing in New York City is because New York City is facing a severe housing shortage. So a healthy vacancy rate for apartment rentals is about 5%, just so that people can have options in where they can, choose to live. Sorry. Oh, sounded like someone had something to say. So one of the reasons a 5% vacancy rate is ideal is because it gives people options on where they can live. But the apartment vacancy rate for New York City is currently at less than 1.5%. And in the Bronx, it's even lower at 0.82%. And during the pandemic, the rental vacancy rate was about 4.3, and pre-pandemic, it was about 3.63. So closer to 5 than we currently are. And because of the vacancy rate being so low, it means that our housing demand is greater than our supply. And when that happens, New Yorkers are experiencing a very high rate of housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. And not having enough homes is also the direct cause of homelessness. So when there are fewer options, people have very few options on where they can go, and they have very few options on being mobile and being able to choose if they stay in a neighborhood or move or so on and so forth. So this chart right here, New York City, as I've said, is not building enough housing to meet New Yorkers' needs. This chart right here shows housing production in New York City from about the 1920s all the way to like the end of the 2010s. The biggest increase in the biggest production of homes took place in the 1920s, excuse me, and it hasn't really gotten as high since. The second biggest part here, as shown by this chart, is the 1960s, followed by the 1950s. And it's just been a very low rate. And one of the biggest causes of the housing shortage has been restrictive zoning rules that make it very difficult for different types of housing to exist. While housing production has slowed, the average household size is declining. So people are using more space with even fewer people. So this right here, new housing has been concentrated in just a few neighborhoods. What I've done here, and on, I believe, all the maps in this presentation, I'll have circled CD12 just to situate us in context with the rest of New York City. So of about 10 community districts have produced more housing than about 49 community districts of New York City combined. So that's been placing an undue pressure on the parts of New York City that have been creating a lot of housing. And the other parts of New York City that haven't been generating as much housing, it has also affected the quality of the housing stock and the ability to stay in certain neighborhoods and be there. So this is some of the human costs of the housing shortage. So really long commutes, people unable to find affordable alternatives, people who can't either go back to their neighborhoods because they've left for a certain amount of time, or people that are stalwarts of their community aren't really able to stay there because they're on a fixed income, and the rise of cost of living has become too much for them to be able to afford. So I've been talking about a lot about zoning, and zoning is one tool that can be used to address New York City's housing shortage. So many New York City agencies work on different policies that aim to address New York City's housing needs. DCP, Department of City Planning, is responsible for the city zoning. So zoning regulates what can be built on a particular site, as I know this board is aware of, how big the building can be, and what uses it can have, whether it be residential, commercial, manufacturing, or industrial. Zoning can include requirements for income restricted housing, and it is within the city's control. And one thing that we've been doing is looking to see how much to see if our housing reforms can complement policy at the New York State level. For all the things that housing does, there are things that housing doesn't do. So it doesn't directly build or fund new housing, but it also can help support different tools to support housing. So like subsidies and tax incentives to create and preserve affordable housing, support for homeownership models as done by HPD, as well as tenant protections. So this right here is just a chart to show the different existing residential districts of New York City. Community District 12 is a mix of low density to about medium density. So as you can see, R1 here is very low density. R1 to R2 is single family. And then all the way up here, R10, there is no R10 in Community District 12. Sorry. So one of the ways that we can address the housing crisis is with zoning to, question? Oh, sorry.
No questions.
Oh, sorry, it popped up on my screen and then I saw it lower and I was like, never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry, it must be someone online. I'm not looking at, online. Is there someone online who has a question?
That's something else.
Going once?
It was a Bassett, yeah.
Yeah.
Bassett? Hey Bassett, do you have a question?
Is it just those on the committee or on the board that can ask questions?
No, I think that everyone can ask a question. Committee members can vote. Go ahead with the presentation, Brenna.
Okay, thanks. So the mantra of this citywide text amendment is a little bit of housing in every neighborhood. So there are different zoning tools that we have as proposals to target like different parts of the city. So all of these proposals that I'm going to go into are for all throughout New York City, wherever they would apply. So it's not just like things that would be proposed for Community District 12. And in doing this, a little bit more housing would be everywhere. So it would be able to look at the root causes of high housing costs, also make New York City more environmentally friendly, and just try to not have huge changes in one set neighborhood of New York City. So these are the different proposals. They're divided between low density, medium and high density. Then we have parking proposals, as well as some other citywide actions that I will go into. So this is a citywide applicability map, and it shows, where the proposals would affect different parts of the city. So as you can see, I've roughly circled where Community District 12 is. And this is a more in-depth map that shows what would happen, what proposals would affect this part of New York City. So the low density proposals look to allow missing middle housing, which includes town center zoning and transit-oriented development, as well as helping homeowners with providing pathways to accessory dwelling units. The medium and high density proposals would create what we're calling a universal affordability preference. Parking proposals, I will go into, I have a couple slides on that. So we're looking to lift costly parking mandates for new housing. And the other citywide actions are to enable conversions, small and shared apartments, as well as infill. And a fun fact here is Woodlawn Cemetery, it's zoned R6, but because it's I believe it's a national landmark, it's no development could happen there.
Next stop, Boston Road in Waits Place. Transfers available to BX12, BX30, and BX39. This stop is Boston Road in Waits Place.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So this is a quick overview of the low density proposals. So restrictive zoning has really restricted the production of housing in some of the 1-family and 2-family districts that exist throughout New York City. Modest apartment buildings exist across low density neighborhoods, but could not be built today. So that's what some of these proposals are looking to reconcile. Some of these restrictive zoning rules that affect the amount of housing that can be generated and built in these neighborhoods. So this is the community applicability map for CD12. So you can see here, it is a healthy mix of 1- and 2-family districts and homes. So this is one of the things that the proposals for missing middle housing would look to reconcile. So this is town center zoning, and town center zoning is missing middle housing, and that refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often that was
White Plains
more
Road
common in
in
New York City. Sorry, does someone have like a speaker, their speaker on?
I'm working on it, got it.
Okay, go ahead. If you're online, make sure you're muted, so that we don't have Luke trying to mute your microphone for you. So go ahead, Brenna.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Luke. So this proposal looks to provide a pathway for mixed use apartments. So this would be commercial on the ground floor and then residential on the other 2 stories. So in Community District 12, these are some of the areas that it would be. So this is along East Gun Hill Road. I believe this is, there are some pubs around there. And this square here would be where the housing would be. As you can see, this is a ground floor commercial. So this would stay as is. And then on top would just be 2 to 4 stories of residential on top. So transit-oriented development. This is the second proposal for missing middle housing, and it would allow for low-rise buildings on sites that are near transit and meet specific criteria. And just something I wanted to say about this map is that this map is only for meeting the first criteria of being near transit. So most of the district is within what's called a greater transit zone, but the not every place in purple is immediately eligible to be considered transit-oriented development. So we couldn't do a truly applicable map for that because property lots can be merged and are subject to other actions. So, you know, it could be this one site that one property owner sells to another and they decide to combine it, and it would not be wasn't as feasible to do a totally applicable map. So sites must be, as I've said, near transit, over 5,000 square feet, and on the short end of the block or facing a street that is over 75 feet wide, so a wide street. And buildings would be 3 to 5 stories top. And then this one is for
On that one. Oh, are we muted? Brent, I think we want to spend some time on the previous slide, because if you look at that map that you provided, the entirety of CB12 is in purple there.
yeah.
So it's obviously pretty important. So anything on, if you have lots on a, say 222nd Street is probably in excess of 75 feet wide. On those empty lots, or on a lot which is currently a single family or on a double lot that is a single family, someone can tear down that single family home that's maybe sandwiched in between 2 other single family homes and construct a 5-story apartment building. Do I understand this correctly?
No, I can spend more time on this. No, I don't believe that would be possible. Elizabeth, could you chime in a little bit if you have things to add on transit or it for that question? But no, that would not be applicable for this. So this is like this map, like I've said, it's just kind of like a starting point. So it has to meet all those criteria. It's not just like one, like, oh, you're near transit. It's like you have to be near transit over 5,000 square feet and on the short end of the block or facing a street over 75 feet wide.
But that was my example. So I got like 2 2,500 square foot lots on 222nd Street. Obviously near transit because I'm in that purple zone. In that situation, can I tear down a single family house and build a 5-story apartment building?
Don't
So-
believe.
So you said 2,500 square feet, right?
So you're saying like it would be
I have 2,500 square foot lots.
yeah.
Right.
So it would be 2,500 square foot lots. You combine, it would still only be 5,000.
Think of it a little bigger.
5,001. I mean, I think you understand my question, Howard. I mean, I'm trying to understand where in CB12 people are going to be able to construct apartment buildings.
Well, are there even single family homes on?
Luke, let's let planning answer the question because they're studying.
Yeah, no,
So
it's
1 square feet.
5,001 square feet. So it sounds like the scenario that you're describing that it would be possible. So we're talking about a wide street, right? we're talking about a very large lot, and we're talking about something that is on the short end of the block and close to transit. So that does meet the criteria that we are talking about here.
So what
As long
streets
as
are
it's,
we're talking about?
Yep.
222nd, we're talking about Edenwald Avenue, Boston Road, Gun Hill Road,
White Plains Road?
White Plains.
yeah.
Bronxwood, what about Bronxwood Avenue?
Brenna, any chance we could make the map a little bigger?
Sure, I can do that.
Also, my question, why is it 3 to 5? Because 3 to 5s are all walk-ups, right? Like, I thought you have to have 6 floors in order to have an elevator.
4.
4 floors to have an elevator? Over 4 floors.
So the goal here really, yeah, I mean, the goal here really is to create modest apartment buildings, right? We don't want to make big, tall towers because that's not a development type that would make sense in an area like we're describing. And so that's why the sizes are what they are and why we've made those recommendations.
No, those are okay. I just thought that,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if they were gonna be walk-ups or if they were gonna have elevator accessibility, because we do have, ultimately, we do have, right, those.
She can. So go ahead, planning.
No, I mean, that's those are really great concerns, and I think that, you know, certainly depending on the specific site, the specific project, the goals and the objectives, there's nothing within zoning that's preventing the creation of those kind of increased accessibility requirements.
Would we have a say in it?
The board,
Yes.
it depends. You know, we are creating kind of these broad parameters that would allow for this development to be happening as of right. But, you know, we always encourage developers to meet with the boards when appropriate and develop relationships and understand your perspectives and priorities.
There are already those 2 buildings on Gun Hill Road that are already like seven stories.
But they're,
Yeah.
but they're not zoned. I'm concerned about R1.
Yeah, so I have a perfect example. If you, that's what I'm telling you, if you go to Google Earth and go to the corner of 22nd Street and Laconia, there is a church that has a huge, over 5,000 square foot lot. Yeah, I may be jumping the gun because you do speak about churches here and the need to put housing.
It's a 22,000.
Yeah, so would that property alone be eligible for, and that's in the midst of row houses, because everybody knows 222,
Yeah.
that have row houses.
You're talking about this side, right?
Yeah, right you're on the corner. Yeah, you're on the Laconia side right now, but yeah, that right there.
It doesn't always have that 10.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. But I'm just saying, if that is for a big example.
Should I turn on my screen so that they can see? Do you mind? I'm gonna share the screen real quick.
Churches and.
Okay, so this is a site in our district that's on a wide street. It's, you know,
2 wide streets.
2 wide streets. It's 22,000 square feet large. So if the church wanted to build an affordable housing building on this empty plot of land, would they be allowed to?
Yes. And I think one of the things that we're really excited about when it comes to faith-based organizations is their ability to provide mission-driven, affordable housing that's really appropriate to the communities that they serve. These are folks that are in it to help the community, and we think that there's a lot of potential for them to do real good.
Are we saying that because we're assuming that for the churches? The only reason why I'm a little bit concerned about that, I've noticed that there have been churches in Harlem who have developers who are building apartments on top of them, and it wasn't a thing where their local people have people that are gonna be in those buildings or anything like that. I guess what my concern is that like, based on faith, is a practice, but is a theory, but by practice, like, what does that actually look like? Because this is broad, right? And that depends on the developer. And if people are, like, we have a lot of churches in the area, especially White Plains Road, it kind of depends on what those churches are doing financially, on whether or not they're going to be susceptible to these developers coming in, and they need the money and they need help with their church, like it creates a situation.
Yeah, I mean, just to offer kind of the flip side to that, by creating this flexibility within zoning, we are reducing some of the cost burden that churches might face in order to develop those sites, which means that their costs go down, which means their ability to produce more mission-driven, affordable housing could go up.
Aren't most double lots in R1 districts about 2,500 to 2,800 square feet?
We can get
Right.
that sounds large to me. We are certainly with these proposals talking about, again, kind of double the size of a lot. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe click on some of these lots, see how big they are.
What I'm
Yeah.
gonna do,
Oh, right there, it's,
just a second, I'm gonna pull up only the R1 districts in our neighborhood.
I think it's about 2,500 for a lot.
was it, right there on 225, it's a double lot.
I don't think we have any R1, just, I think we have R1 in Hampton.
Sorry, R4.
You want R4?
Yeah, give me R4.
Right.
We'll go back to 222.
Okay, R4 is right here. You see,
Okay.
so that's between,
Go to 222, go back to Laconia.
I'm sorry, just a second. So yeah, Laconia, it shows the street width. 222nd Street is 100 feet wide. Laconia here is 100 feet wide. Yeah, but yeah.
Scroll up, scroll to the left on 222nd. Zoom in right there, there's a double lot. Go down, a little down, right there next to 50, 51, it's a double lot. 60, I'm sorry, the big lot right there, 61.
Right.
Right there, that's a double lot.
So 7,400 square feet.
But the point that zoning is making is that, this is up to the owner's prerogative. If they want to put an ADU back here or use this garage,
Well, you're talking about that. I think what Bob was trying to.
My question is, for this committee, is does a 5-story apartment building belong there?
No.
So I think just
What?
quickly, I think on this example, you're not looking at the short end of the block. I just going from the map, it looked like that was the long end of the block.
But your material said 75 square feet or greater or the short end of the block. So
No, it's and.
It's and.
No, all of those conditions are in and,
Yeah.
so it has to be everything. It can't just check one box.
Rita, you sound like you're underwater there. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll take my stuff out.
See, that says or, on the short end of the block or facing the street over 70 feet wide. So if it's or, I think it's definitely problematic. If it's and, that's a different thing, but the materials definitely say or.
this is a large lot that's not being used to its fullest potential. I mean,
We you don't want to put a 6-story building, it's gonna take away from all
it's not
character.
a 6-story building, it's 3
Five, it can be
Think
3
about
5.
it, same thing, 50-story building, 50 feet.
3-story building.
None of them.
Like, in a way, I think with the Bronx, that it's a good and the whatever thing is like uptown Bronx in our district, we do have single family housing. And I feel like, a lot of times now, everybody.
So Ariel's speaking with Ariel talk and then we'll go back to the plan. Go ahead, Ariel.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying in general that, the Bronx, the great thing about our neighborhood is that we're very diverse with buildings and single family housing. And a lot of people are trying to be in spaces where they can be in family houses. And it just seems that one of the criteria in order to solve the whole housing crisis is to keep putting everybody in a building, where we're saying that we want to keep community people, and when we're all saving up our money, it's like, great, you could be in a basement or you could be in another apartment. Not saying that we don't need the 3 to 4, because we can do it in certain areas, but that one in particular already seems to be single family or multifamily housing street. So in hindsight, the 3 to 4 there may look like it does not belong. If that makes
already
sense.
has some of those.
Yeah, some of this that, like, yeah, that
Where it
kind
doesn't
of
belong.
yeah, like it's gonna be more.
Go ahead, George.
No, no, no.
I'm gonna recognize George. Go ahead. Wait, George,
Oh, no, I was just gonna say,
make sure one person talks at a time.
no, I was gonna say the one thing I think that, what Bobby raised, that I think is important for everyone to consider. Is the question of, does that fit?
Yeah, that's a-
And here's a question I had, I was gonna ask separately in a different forum, just ask it directly. What is city planning's vision for the city? What is enough? Right now, we have 8.4 million people. Are we looking at 15 million? Are we looking to double that number? What's the magic number who are we building this housing for? Because I think that then gets to answer a lot of our other questions. Some of the things that we were discussing, some of the things that we haven't discussed can then be addressed once we do that. But to Bobby's point, and I think it's an excellent point, because I grew up in a house like that. My parents had a semi-attached house right next to 5-story building. So in the summertime, when we were barbecuing, we had no privacy because the people would be like, oh, throw me a hamburger. And again, it's hilarious, but it just, I'm like, why didn't they just build? There was 4 houses on the corner. They could have easily bought my parents out and then construct, because right across the street from my parents is a 5-story building. On the other corner is a 5-story building. My parents' house and the other 3 homes were the only thing. And I never understood it. Alfredo was talking about it. The Laconia is a perfect example. You have a 2-story building, 1-story taxpayer, 3-story building, and you have all this infill, and it doesn't make any sense. And the idea that you're trying to make it make sense with a broad stroke brush may not be the best thing for Community Board 12, because that's how you're painting it. Look at it.
So if to offer a side point, we're arguing here about 3 to 5-story buildings and about whether they fit. I live right next to a 33-story building here in this district. And it's a monolith in the sky. But is it scary? No, it's fine. I don't know what the worry is about 3 to 5-story housing when people need housing. When my parents were my age, they had 5 kids already. I don't have any kids. You want to know why I don't have any kids? Because I can't live anywhere in New York City with 5 kids, with any kids. And that's what happened. You guys had it good when you're growing up, able to live in a house. You can't find houses in New York City. This proposal is trying to get at the fact that people in my generation and younger don't have any prospects when it comes to having families. And I think that's something we have to build for. How are we going to build the next generation of kids if we don't have adequate housing? And if it means a 3 to 5-story building on a 100-foot wide street that's over 5,000 feet wide, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world.
Well, Luke, I actually left the city in a high-rise apartment with my family because I wanted a little more privacy. So for me, it was the opposite. I didn't have it that good. But I think what we're trying to say is, where does it fit best? Where does it fit best, right? We just kind of have to realize it.
Yes, no, I just wanted to add to Luke, what you were saying. I think the people that are, I don't want to say opposing, but the people that have a concern about does this fit, is we're trying to preserve the nature of the neighborhood. Like, I love Uptown because there's a lot of homes. South Bronx has a lot of buildings too. I lived in the South Bronx, I lived Uptown. South Bronx, it's a different, there's a different feel to the neighborhood, right? And in the sake of trying to preserve the community, they just want to make sure that it's not, like you said, no one wants to live in a single family and look out their door and there's 30 stories right next to them. It just doesn't look like, it doesn't make sense for the neighborhood. So I think both make sense. Yes, we do need housing, absolutely. But if we're not building houses, no one has the prospect to buy homes now. Everyone has to rent. So that's another thing.
Well, that's a different. We have homeownership apartment buildings, and I actually have been fortunate enough to win a lottery in one. Built by Habitat for Humanity is a really amazing opportunity that changed my life. But we should be doing more of this because it's terrible that the only way of homeownership is by buying a single family house. Why can't we buy apartment?
Condos, co-ops, yeah, multi-family, yeah.
And that's stuff we want. But the first thing is housing supply. And Brennan told us that zoning isn't going to solve everything. We need the state to do stuff. We need, HPD to do stuff.
I'll give you an example. I was in the building department prior to being the district manager. And the Palm Bay area, the end of the 6th line, was back when Jimmy Baca was the councilman, he did a lower density management growth area. Meaning that you couldn't put buildings there. Now, if anybody knows I-95, that's 95, right? So you drive along 95 and you see the 6 train and you're driving on there, you'll see like on the 35, 55 Bruckner Boulevard, you'll see a small 10 or 12-story building right on the corner. Right across the street from that was an empty lot that they put all private homes now. And you had this sort of infill, and we had this one constituent that was bought out by a big developer. She wouldn't sell. They bought the surrounding houses. So they literally they built, they maxed out, and she waged this campaign. Ultimately, she sold, but she waged the 3-year campaign because, her point was just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should. And I think that that's the consideration. She was on the transit district. I will say, and that was one of the questions I was going to have later. We've already been through this before many of you were board members of the board. When de Blasio first became the mayor, he rezoned all the transit districts. He did ZQA, MIH on transit districts. So White Plains Road, 3 blocks to Bronx Boulevard, 3 blocks to Paulding, you can do whatever you want. I shouldn't say whatever you want, you can do an R6. The point that I'm making is that, and Brennan, I had a conversation with Brennan about this, we got a request for 3901 White Plains Road, which I shared with some of my board members, which is the old Walgreens site on the corner of 222
Yeah, with that.
White Plains Road. And they weren't satisfied that that's a 1-story taxpayer. That's just a Walgreens. They're going to propose it. They asked for a rezoning. They came to the community board, or they're going to come to the community board. They're going to say, hey, we don't want an R6A. We want an R8A. The difference? Like 7 stories. So the question that this board has to consider, and I think that ultimately is what we're considering, is what looks right where. Because to your point, this is not Manhattan Loop. This is not downtown Brooklyn. This is not the South Bronx that had vacant lots that you could put multi-story buildings. This is the community that was built out specifically for single families or 2-family homes and give an opportunity so that people can relax in their backyards and barbecue and hang out and do things and have a driveway to park their car. Exactly, like a lot of people. And the question becomes, I'm not anti-development. I want to see Wakefield Village happen. But you know what? Wakefield Village doesn't happen under any neighborhood. It's not knocking down private homes to build new homes. They're building a platform like they did in Hudson River and Hudson Yards to build housing there. So you're not really impacting anybody. But the question here is with this, and just like we did with the City of Yes Economic Opportunity, which by the way, 30 out of 59 community boards voted against, we have an opportunity, and again, they just said it in their presentation. What is enough? Is this all purple map that they showed us acceptable? Because it doesn't, again, 222nd Street with that one lot, and Luke, there's a lot of those lots. I drive up and down 222nd Street, those are double. As a matter of fact, people used to complain because there was a beautiful house that they knocked down to build a semi-attached home on 222nd Street. And I remember Ruby Moore, Judy Hudson, all the people at East 222nd Street were very alarmed when the developer did that. So the idea that like we could go into that one property that was 7,500 square feet and build a 5-story building, it's not a question, it's out of context.
So, last point, and then I want city planning to address everything. We're getting to the point where we know where everyone stands, and there's a lot to cover.
When did Bloomberg do that rezoning?
It was the Plaza, it was the first year.
So it takes some time. We're starting to see buildings coming up, right? What we do here, what the city does here, it's going to take a decade, it's not going to happen overnight.
Okay, city planning, feel free to address any of the comments that you heard, and then you can continue with your presentation.
Maybe I could just jump in on the question about what is enough, because I know that comes from a place of really loving your community as it is, and wanting to preserve the good things about it. And I'm not going to lie, right? This is something that we hear from people all the time. But the fact of the matter is, not producing enough housing is not going to keep people from wanting to come to New York City, right? The problem that we're dealing with right now is that we don't have enough room for the people who are here now and who want to move out of their parents' house, for example, or who want to stop living with roommates, for example, as well as people who are coming here to the city and live, in a housing type that makes sense for them. So what we're really trying to do is put forward a nuanced proposal that makes sense for the kinds of neighborhoods that we have in New York City, so that when we talk about a little bit of housing, hopefully it is something that feels like it makes sense in your community. I want to let Brenna keep walking you through the proposal so that you can get a sense of kind of some more of what we're talking about here. But I did want to address that point because I really hear and appreciate, the place that's coming from and what it's speaking to.
Go ahead, Brenna.
Oh, sorry, I just saw someone's hand raised when Elizabeth spoke. Did you want to have them say something or?
Anthony, you're recognized.
Yes, hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in and doing the presentation. George made some interesting statements. My concern is the community benefits, all right? Because you had made a statement earlier where you had mentioned that you tell the developers that they should come and speak to the community board. But as far as jobs for people in the community, you have to tell them to come and speak to the community for that too. Like, are we going to put some language in there where community benefits are in these projects and this building that's going right around in our community?
So yeah, I hear that question. That makes a lot of sense. I think just to clarify, what we're talking about here is not a specific project. What we're really
talking about a lot of stuff going on in our community building, regardless of how big the buildings are. I'm just talking about in reference to some people in the community having jobs in their own community so they can have like a sense of ownership while they're doing the projects. I think that's a sense of ownership it gives them because they're working in the community that they live in. So can we talk to that? Like, I know it's a lot of other stuff going on, but I think that we need to have some language in there where we can get some benefits for the community, the youth that's coming up, and just being in the community working. It's really important.
For sure. And I know that the board has also been considering the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, which is really thinking about kind of commercial districts, opportunities for businesses, opportunities for jobs. And so from our perspective, that's really the place where we're having those conversations and making those types of changes available. We're really laser focused here on getting the rules right when it comes to zoning and when it comes to what kind of housing can be built.
Right, because what happens is when these developers come in our community, all right, they don't give us training, they don't give us anything. They come in and they go out. So what happens is the community's still left at the same spot. So we're looking for careers and we're trying to get like in the union and we're trying to get training. So I'm really pushing forward for when if you come in our community, come in there and help us.
All right, thank you, Anthony. City planning can respond.
Okay, yeah, no, just to echo what Elizabeth said, like one of our big focuses now is just about specifically like the zoning, because zoning has been one of the roadblocks to generating more housing. And this is something that I'll mention later in our presentation. But one of the things that we are going to the community board with and coming to the community board with is like suggestions on how to make what we're proposing like better, or if there are things that maybe don't work for you, like just to let us know and actually like give them to us and give us suggestions. And yeah.
Do you know that the city council is going to vote against the city economic opportunity for commercial and residential districts, right?
Was not aware of that, but
We're
sorry,
waiting.
Elizabeth.
We're waiting on them.
Yeah, but like we've had meetings with them. So the point that you're trying to make commercial now, you're doing the flip side on this, on the housing opportunity. So if again, you're already jumped. That's the other problem that we've had with this, is that you jump from economic opportunity into housing opportunity without letting economic opportunity, where you're going to get more, not half, but you're going to get some significant pushback from the city council. I know that you're aware of it because when we've met with our city council members, they told me that they're having these conversations with you.
Should we continue with the?
Yeah, they can respond and then we should continue with the meeting.
Sure. I mean, the only thing that I'll say to that, is we really do feel a sense of urgency, both in terms of fixing our commercial corridors, and addressing the housing crisis. And really, that's why we're working as fast as we can to fix these rules. So hopefully we can start getting onto the right track.
Go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to reshare my screen again. Okay, so I had ended on this one and we had a bunch of questions for it. Is everyone able to see it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So did this one. This is the next proposal that I had wanted to talk about. It's to allow 1 and 2 family homes to add accessory dwelling units. So just right off the top, this being able to add an accessory dwelling unit is based on the building type and not the underlying zoning district. ADUs are, different variety of housing that CHO would allow for. Many other cities have legalized them and experienced benefits, and they just give general variety to like homeowners who maybe want to help offset some housing costs, or if they want to keep certain family members close and have multi-generational families. This, I'm just going to minimize this just to show this. There we go. So these are the different types of ADUs that can exist. There's detached, basement, and attic. One thing to say is that basement ADUs are the only way to have ADUs if you have a connected family home. So like if you have like a row house and you have a neighbor on each side, you can only do a basement unit, basement ADU, because there needs to be a point of egress. ADUs are also not allowed in basement ADUs aren't allowed in the flood zone. ADUs are the result of partnership between the rules around ADUs are a result of partnership with other New York City agencies, and they still must comply with like the building code and multi-dwelling law. So no way around those. Are there any questions about this one? I can stop for each section, or
Yeah,
I can just
ADUs.
Yes.
It wasn't clear to me looking at the materials. Can you have a basement ADU, attic ADU, and
No.
a ADU?
Sorry to cut you off, but it's only one ADU per 1 to 2 family building, and the ADU can only be can be a max of 800 square feet.
And how many, you can rent out an ADU to any couple, right? I mean, the materials keep referencing, you know, grandma and adult children and things of that nature, but it can really be rented out to anybody.
Yes, I mean, still needs to comply with multi-dwelling law and building code, but as long as it does with those, then yes. We're not superseding any existing laws.
And I noticed in the guidelines, there's a change to the definition of family. And you said you wanted to modernize the definition of family, but that definition of family also increased the definition to include, instead of just one boarder permitted, I think it goes to not more than 4 boarders. So is a single family house under the city of Yes permitted? You know, separate from ADUs, is a single family house under the proposed changes now allowed to have 4 boarders? What's a boarder? A boarder is somebody who you're renting your home to, who lives with you and pays you rent. But has access to the full space, right? So you can't construct a wall and in your single family home and say, okay, the boarder gets upstairs if it's not, you know, allowed to be so by buildings, right? But when you have a boarder, you say, okay, when you live in, you know, my son who graduated and went to college, you can live in his room. And you have access to the full house, and you give me, you know, $800 a month. And a lot of people have boarders. And what my reading of the zoning code is that you can have 1. Now, the proposed city of Yes seems to change the definition of family, so that instead of 1 boarder, you can have 4 boarders, and I want to make sure that I'm correct about that. This is completely separate from the ADU. And tenants in you can have a legitimate tenant in an ADU. That's different.
Boarder, the NDU doesn't allow you to have SROs. How does the boarder allow to lock his room?
Boarder can lock his room, but they can't have like separate mail or anything like that.
No, but I'm saying, how does it, and the reason you can't have an SRO in a private house is because if you lock the door, you then limit access in the event of a fire, egress. So that's why it's illegal. So you're saying boarders can lock their.
I didn't lock the door. Oh, no. You can't have a lock on your door preventing access.
Yeah, you can. That's
Right,
illegal.
right. That's correct.
Okay.
So no, I'm saying, can a single family house have the same single family house?
And does that boarder allow the privacy of locking its door so that whoever's in the house can access that room? They're not there.
That's not what he's asking.
Well, that's not what I'm asking.
He's
No,
asking.
I understand, but I'm asking you if that their end run around SROs. Because that's the problem in this district.
But can city planning address my question and then also George's?
Can you restate your question?
Yeah, because is it Bobby?
Yeah, it's Bobby.
One speaking? Okay. So your question you said was separate from the ADU. It was, could you have 4 boarders? Would that be living within like the house itself or the ADU?
Family house, okay, under the current zoning law, you can have 1 boarder. And the way I read the annotated text of City of Yes is that I can now increase that under the definition of family. I think it's on page 13 of the annotated text, or page 12, 13, something like that. It says that you can increase from 1 boarder to 4 boarders. Okay, so I'm a little bit in the context of discussing ADUs. If we're gonna have a couple people in the backyard, or a couple people in the basement, or a couple people in the attic, and then we're gonna have 4 other people in the single family home, Is that getting, are we getting a little close to a Howard Johnson's?
So just to clarify here, really all that we're doing here is making the zoning consistent with the state law. The state law around the definition of family is already established. And what we're doing here is just making the zoning consistent with that definition that the state established.
You're saying state law, New York state law is that you may have war borders in your house now, that was a result of the budget that just passed?
No, this is see if I can find a date for you. This is a change that's well established in state law. This isn't something as a result of the budget.
So we got the annotated zoning text, and we're on page 13, and it says, comment, the proposal would replace the existing family definition with the one found in the state's multiple dwellings law. This would avoid confusion and remove outdated language regarding the concept of family from the zoning regulations.
Can you back out? Yeah, okay. So Luke has identified the portion that I was concerned about. See, and you see the striked out language there. At the top there. Yeah, right. It says a single person occupying the dwelling and maintaining a household, including not more than one boarder, as defined in the HMC. Okay, that's stricken out. Now, if you go down to the underlined language, that's the new. That's what's being proposed. It says with not more than 4 borders. Okay, so are we going from 1 border to 4? That's my concern.
Again, this is a change that has already happened in the state law, and so we're just kind of bringing them consistent. I'm happy to. I don't think that the chat is turned on, but I'm happy to share you a link to the state law if you want to dig into it.
No? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Laws for New York City
What's-
versus New York State. Aren't there different laws for New York City versus New York State? Because New York State is a larger area, and I would think that the city would have different laws within the 5 boroughs.
But she's referencing multiple dwelling, which is New York State dwelling. It pertains to the whole entire thing. That, yeah, that's
There's not like a sub-law for New York City regarding that?
the building code, but it's very vague.
And the zoning text. That's what we're looking at. And what planning is saying is that they're codifying the zoning text to be consistent with state law. I don't know when that law passed.
Right, they're saying it already happened.
When did it pass? When did this law pass to change the law for borders? Was it this year? Because if it was this year, it was done in the budget.
It's not this year. I'm sorry. I'm literally like paging through the case law here. It looks like it goes back to the 1970s.
I've been chasing that normal dwelling laws for a living long time.
Yeah.
A lot of them is really. Can we get some training?
Okay. All right. Well, no, you can ask a question.
Rhonda, go ahead, keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So share my screen again. Okay, so I was talking about the accessory dwelling units, and these are some parameters behind how accessory dwelling units must be constructed and designed and exist. So this other part is what we're calling district fixes, and this would help with non-complying buildings. So in an R41 district, which are common in southern Brooklyn and eastern Queens, they're 2-family districts that allow semi-detached buildings like the one you see here, but buildings like these pre-1961 duplexes could not be constructed today because they have more square footage than is currently allowed and their rear yards are too small. So what's in the photo is actually wouldn't be allowed today because of current zoning rules. So these zoning rules to help homeowners, district fixes would adjust FARs, perimeter heights, yards, and other rules to provide greater flexibility for some older homes. Okay, So those were the low density proposals, and the one I'm going to talk about now is the medium and higher density proposal. So this will be about universal affordability preference, and we call it UAP. I'll just call it universal affordability preference, just to save the term a little bit more. It would allow apartment buildings to be about 20% larger, so long as the extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. So, sorry, I should move this down here because it's messing with where we are. Okay, so this is a citywide map of where universal affordability preference is applicable throughout New York City, and I've roughly circled where CD12 is. So universal affordability preference, this map shows which districts have an existing senior housing preference today, and through the universal affordability preference, all forms of affordable and supportive housing would be able to take advantage of the higher Florida area ratio already provided to affordable senior housing in these districts. However, there are some districts that don't have this senior housing preference today, and this proposal would create new FARs to enable the growth of affordable and supportive housing in every neighborhood. So this is a map of Community District 12, and I'm actually, since I know you are all interested in the maps and want to look at those like more in depth, I'm just gonna zoom in. Is that a little bit better to, oh shoot, to see the map? Okay, thanks. All right, so so these maps, so this map shows the districts that have an existing senior preference, as I so mentioned. So what does affordability mean for universal affordability preference? Universal affordability preference would have an affordability requirement of 60% area median income. Area median income, AMI, is a measure of affordability established by the federal government. It also takes into account some other parts of the New York metro area, which might skew the average for what is considered affordable for New York City. So at 60% AMI, UAP, universal affordability preference would serve lower income New Yorkers than the existing zoning tool, which I will go into a little bit. So I'm just gonna change slides. Go out. Okay. So universal affordability preference allows for income averaging, which allows a wider range and more deeply affordable homes. Here. Oh, sorry. Okay. So universal affordability preference would replace voluntary inclusionary housing, achieving deeper affordability and allowing for income averaging, as I've said. It is modeled after the existing AIRS program and current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. It would allow for incremental housing growth in neighborhoods and encourage affordable housing throughout the city rather than concentrating it in a few neighborhoods. So voluntary inclusionary housing over here was 80% AMI with no income averaging.
Brenna, don't mind for a second, go ahead.
Sorry, you can continue your slide. Once you're done with the slide, I was gonna ask a question.
Sure, okay. I'll try to get through this part so you can ask your question.
Okay.
So universal affordability preference, UAP, is 60% AMI with income averaging. So it allows for homes and a mix of incomes to reach 60% AMI. So that means you can serve more people in the 30% AMI as long as you average to 60% AMI. And this here is a chart to show that. Yes, Luke? Was that Luke?
Yeah. So I guess my question is that, so sometimes when you are on Housing Connect, you'll see that an apartment building is like, oh, the only apartments available are 130% AMI. So that would basically, you could only build 130% AMI if you like compensate and build like 20% AMI, or like you have to average it to 60, right? You can't just build 130% AMI.
Yes, you would have to average it to 60. So you can, oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, sorry. It's sometimes a little hard to hear. Yeah, so you can, you would have to average to 60% AMI, but you can do that however. So this would be preferable because it allows for you to do, income averaging. So you get to provide more units at the 30% AMI as long as it averages to, the 60%.
The AMI.
Yes.
Are you rearranging that formula? Because a lot of these folks who are coming in and that fit that AMI, what are we doing or what is being done to resurrect the AMI as far as the formula is concerned for whatever particular neighborhood is in question? Is there any changes?
You mean changes to what's happening now? Or
Changes in the formula regarding the AMI? Because a lot of these residents coming in do not fit that criteria. And it seems not to be any type of segue regarding the change. Just pertaining to the AMI.
You're saying it's not affordable.
It's not affordable. It's not affordable.
sorry, your word cut off a little bit. Could you repeat yourself? It's not
affordable.
Affordable.
Yes.
It's not achieving deeper affordability.
So what are you doing or is anything being done with regards to that formula, AMI?
So we don't have really any control over AMI because it's a federally set standard. So what we're looking to do with universal affordability preference here is to make it work for New York City. So through the income averaging, we're trying to see if we can, by averaging to 60% and, still using AMI, try to help more people who are like in the 30% AMI versus, just it being 90% AMI.
That's a major problem. And the only person that has really addressed that, I hate to say, is AIC. She's the only person that said, she's the only individual that stated anything regarding the AMI. And it needs to be done on a federal level. And I do understand that. But there needs to be some type of change. It's affecting all of the income clarification based on what you're trying to do and based on what is already in existence.
I think what Rob is saying is that, to put a finer point on it, in New York City, we're in a municipality that charges federal tax, state income tax, and a local tax, which for some families can be significant. So the bite of that $102,000 salary of AMI requiring $27.90, or I can't define it.
Yeah.
But for a family of three on a $101,000 salary, they're not coming home. That's the gross. That's what AMI is projected on, gross. Obviously, for a family that's making that much, you can, just from the Fed, you could take 22% off. 25 on the 100, then the state's taking another 8, the city's taking another 7. So that adds up, and it really leaves families scraping to get by to make that payment. Because the thing in your buildings is that these are all rentals, and the utilities and all these other services are not included. So
that's where we can make recommendation.
not on the AMI.
Well, that's where the issue is.
So what they're doing is, instead of just having a general category of AMI, they're trying to target a lower percentage. So targeting the average of 60 rather than right now, you can build 130%. You can't build 130%.
No, I think I understand what you're saying. What Luke is saying is that if you can get more affordability, you get more lower income, that's cool. But even on the lower income, let's just say you get somebody who's making $30,000 a year, a single person, and they're saying, oh, your rent's $700 a month. You're still in the same boat as the family that's making, the three family that's making 100,000, because even though you've lowered that standard, all the costs still remain the same. You're still paying federal income tax at $30,000. You're still, it may not be as much as a person making 100,000, you're still paying.
It's hard to.
Yeah, it's hard.
When you win it at lotteries, you get in and you're like struggling. I'm not doubting that either. It's the same thing.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is relative, even if you're doing the lower, it's still hard for the lower.
Yeah.
Because even at $700, like, that's still tough for somebody making 30,000.
It's not affordable.
Yeah, it makes it really hard.
That's something that our federal.
That's what it's, right?
But this is gonna move faster than that, and we're gonna be in the same.
There you go. So it's
But the AMI in like our average median household in our area, if we're putting all this, has to be, taken into effect and.
It goes back to then, the buildings are not gonna be rentable, and then they go to the shelters. And so those would be mindful. That's what's going, that's what they're proposing.
Because well,
I have a question, maybe we can help you with this. City planning, this came up in, your director, Paul Phillips had a community conversation at the YMCA with the council member. And they were talking about a council member, I believe she's in Brooklyn, that did like a spot study. And if this rings any bells, just feel free to cut me off. They were exploring the idea of making it affordable for neighborhood people, sort of market rate for what that area could afford. Does that ring a bell? I know we spoke about it briefly, but you said you were gonna check with Paul.
Yeah, no, didn't talk about that one, but no, please go on, George.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was something, and I was just looking for it on my email. I go to a lot of stuff and it just kind of gets lost in my brain. There was a councilwoman who, like, for example, wasn't gonna vote for this unless she did something on how it would impact her district. And it was a large swath of either Queens or Brooklyn. I want to say it was Councilmember Shanick. I'm not 100% sure, but she was like, and they did it. It was, 4 blocks wide, maybe 10 blocks long. And they did a rezoning for that specific area. And they weren't using AMI, which I found curious. So I was just wanting to see if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not as familiar with that. And one of the things about these proposals is that they're not like rezonings, they're for all of New York City. So I think something like that is like hyper specific, and that would have to be done for every different part of New York City, which I think is like what you're saying would be great. Like if that could be done for like different parts of New York City, and then look at like what's affordable for like Bensonhurst or Gray's End, all of those different neighborhoods. But I think and Elizabeth, please like jump in. I can't see her, so I'm trusting she's on. But one of the parts of what we're talking about is that in terms of like immediacy, like this is one of those like solutions for that, because something like that is a longer study and takes a bit more energy and isn't as quick to implement. And then it's just more difficult to implement for like each different part of New York City.
Yeah, that's right, Brenna. And I see that Ted Weinstein, our colleague Ted Weinstein from HPD is here. I don't know, Ted, if you want to jump in, because HPD also has such a vital role when it comes to creating deeply affordable housing.
Sure. I'm sorry I got on a little bit late. Obviously, establishing proper rent levels is a balancing act, and it's a difficult one. In that, on one hand, we want housing that's being built to be affordable to different levels, but we also need to have enough income coming in to make the building run. It doesn't serve anybody's purpose if a building gets built and if the rent is extremely low, and therefore that's great for the tenant, but then there just isn't enough money to make the building operate properly. So it is a difficult balancing act. Some of the things also are not within the city's control. The use of AMI itself It's not just a matter of that HUD has a formula, and in New York it's even a little more complicated, that establishes what the AMI is. It's that there are various programs that say that it's based on a percentage of the AMI. For example, the low-income housing tax credits, which nationally is probably the #1 tool to establishing affordable housing in the entire country. And so New York just can't, to my knowledge, just unilaterally say, well, we're not going to use AMI, the AMI system anymore. The other point that, though, that I often make is that, you know, the area median income, and then by definition, and you see when you see these charts, they're the percentages. So 100% is the median income. That's by definition. Now, if we finance projects and buildings that then all charged, let's say the AMI itself, 100%, that would be wrong, but we don't. You know, in the Bronx, the typical building that gets financed through our program has a range, and we have a range because we think that's good public policy. It's a range generally of between 30% of the AMI and now 80% of the AMI. And there's different levels. So there'll be a certain number of units, maybe at 30, a certain number at 50, a certain number at 70, something like that. So number one, the buildings that are being built and financed again through us are not using something that is just totally out of the range for people. The other thing is, and the AMI does change each year. In fact, it's gone up quite a bit in the last few years. I mean, years ago, I had been an active advocate in certain areas of the Bronx for having more units at higher levels. I felt, well, there was certainly a need for people at the lower levels. There was also, we were hearing again and again, we still are hearing, that there's a need for more housing for people of moderate and middle income. You know, the young professional who, you know, got a good education, got a good job, and would like to stay in the neighborhood. We hear that from lots of community boards. And so there was a time that I would advocate that range maybe should have been 30 to 100%, or even a little more, depending on the actual location. Truthfully, I'm not doing that anymore because the numbers have gone up so much. And my point of saying this is that we are now in the Bronx rarely having units financed to us at more than the 80% of AMI because we think it is too high. Now, in some cases, it is, and somebody mentioned the ads for Housing Connect, where the units they see are for 130%. But that generally is where the developer is was using the 421A tax program, which has now gone out of existence. And that said that 20%, if you're going, I'm sorry, 30%, if you're going to use that tax program, incentive program, then 30% of the units cannot be more than 130% of the AMI. That's by state law. That's not something that HPD just has decided. And so that's, again, an example of something that's really not within our ability to do something about. What you also find, by the way, if you really look, is that they all say 130%, but very often they're charging less because they may realize themselves that at that particular location, the market can't do that, doesn't allow for that. What they do is they say 130%, so that at some point in the future, maybe they can get that. But if you look at the actual dollar amounts, they're often less than 130%. So there's all these different factors that go into it. And you know, we're not saying that there's not a problem because obviously we want affordability. And sometimes remember also, it's not just what the range is, it's the distribution. So you can have one building that has a range of 30% to 80%, and the highest amount of units is at the 30 to 50%, let's say. And then you can have another building right down the block that has also a 30% to 80% range, and that the large majority of the units might be at the 60 to 80% range. And so every building, really, every project has to be looked at individually. You know, I will agree, if somebody rents an apartment at 130% and they can't afford that, they really shouldn't be entering into that. And that's why in this particular case, where there's something that is within our control, and that is the UAP, and saying that forget the benefit, that if you're going to benefit from the UAP, if you're going to get you know, a bump, 20% of the floor area, to enable you to get more units and therefore more income, the least you can do is, have those units be permanently affordable and affordable at a range at a level that we think is more affordable, such as the 60. The advantage of the income averaging is, again, in order to get that 60, maybe you would say some units at 30 or 40 and some units at 90 and 100, as long as it averages out to no more than 60. You do that now with they can do that now with the low income housing tax credits. It used to be strictly 80%. And now you can have a little more as long as it's no more than 80%. And so hopefully this is a direction that other programs will go in as well. But in the case of UAP, it's something that is within the city's control, and that's what we're requiring. I know that was a long explanation, but I hope some of that explains it.
I found the article. So the article is in city limits. The council member is Crystal Hudson. She has an industrial area. She wrote, her quote is, "So instead of relying on area median income determined for the New York City region, the development framework includes the actual median income for District 35 neighborhoods, which then, I guess, localizes it just to her district, and parses it further by race to identify which AMI brackets to prioritize in each neighborhood," said Hudson. That's her quote in the city limits, and that was her deal with city planning or the community board on rezoning that specific part of her district. Is that an option? This is citywide, to forego the AMI and go to the actual median income for each respective district.
As I said, various programs such as the low-income housing tax credits have to use an AMI. Now, I don't know anything about that particular project, but it sounds to me like what they're basically just doing is they're using the dollar amount instead of the AMI percentage amount. I mean, I'm sure somebody could just sit down and figure out what it is, but instead of calling it the 80% or the 60% of the AMI, they're talking dollar amounts.
Sounds like she got a lower percentage.
Okay, I think we should continue the presentation.
Thank you, Ted.
But George, we should follow up with that.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, so I can continue with my presentation. I have a couple more slides left and then open up, I guess, officially for Q&A, whatever the chair or chairs want. So this here is an example of how universal affordability preference works. So there's a church in an R6 district that wants to build affordable housing today. If they did it now, they would get an FAR of 3.0, regardless of if they're developing market rate housing or affordable housing. That would get them about 35 units. If they used universal affordability preference, they would get an FAR of 3.9, which is an increase in buildable floor area of about 30%, and the 0.9 FAR can only be used for affordable housing. That would net them about 10 to 12 additional units, which doesn't sound like a lot, of course, in terms of a single development, but if that's applied all throughout New York City, it's it's a significant portion and would really help ease the housing crisis and also affordability concerns. Okay, and this here is an example of what a building would look like with UAP versus without UAP. So this here is without UAP. As you can see, it's right here, like one story. And then up here, it's a few more stories on top, is what it would look like. So this is another proposal. It would be to end parking mandates. So this would make parking optional for new buildings, as many other cities have done. Parking would still be allowed. So there's nothing here that's saying that you cannot build parking. It just will not be required with new construction.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
If you give a developer the option of putting parking to accompany the building, or putting in more units, what's the track record of developers opting on the side of including more parking?
So developers in a lot of the projects that we have looked at generally provide more parking than they're required to. So that was part of where this mandate came from, that it's provided for. And, you know, I do have another slide about how, like, the intricacies of how parking mandates would be dealt with.
Yeah, I want to say that I saw somewhere in the thousands of pages of materials that there, when you give the developer the waiver, generally speaking, that developer takes the opportunity to use the waiver and does not put parking in the building, or puts very limited parking in the building, as opposed to creating more parking units than they have to.
That was in the annotated text that you had read, or the
I think it was in some of the materials. I don't remember if it was your presentation or if it was in the other 40-page illustrated guide.
Oh, the explain.
There was a chart somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is what one of the things we have been looking at. Maybe the next slide might answer like some more questions. So these would be additional changes to the parking rules. Would lift parking mandates for houses of worship, community facilities with sleeping accommodations, and non-residential portions of some mixed-use developments. It would require a CPC authorization to remove existing parking except for 1 and 2 family homes, would simplify floor area exemptions related to parking spaces, and allow public use for accessory parking. It would not, however, do the last 5 things. So this would have no bearing on on-street parking regulations or off-street parking regulations for purely commercial or industrial buildings, would not impose new parking maximums or restrictions on the amount of parking that can be built, would not automatically remove existing parking, and most importantly, not force anyone to build no parking. So could you say, sorry, Bobby, could you say again, like what you had seen in the materials, just because?
Brenna. So if I have a 100-unit building that I'm constructing, my understanding is you need about 40 parking units to support a 100-unit building. Is that about right? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so 50. Was there a thought process, instead of saying you don't have to create any new parking, to say, let's do 25% or let's do 15%, as opposed to just saying, let's knock all the parking out, or let's make it completely optional for the developer?
If you do affordable housing, then you can lower the requirement for parking. So if you do have to go with the acronym.
Right, so that might be where I got 40% from.
Yeah.
So it's average between the 50% and.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you understand where I'm going here? Was there a thought process by the
Between, sorry.
Let's kind of cut the baby here. Maybe we don't need 50% parking, but maybe we also don't need 0% parking.
So one of the reasons behind the no parking was parking is like incredibly expensive to build versus like actual housing. And like the big focus of this citywide text amendment is housing. So we were thinking of housing people and making sure that there are units to house them. So that was part of our process.
That's a little confusing. You're saying you're willing to let people build bigger and bigger in the Northeast Bronx. And we're already limited in type of parking here. So if somebody puts up a 15-story building, no parking requirements, where all those people, those with cars in that building gonna park at? They're gonna park in our community, which we don't have no parking, which is gonna cost mayhem. So was this ever studied? Say, for instance, on my block, we know who parks where. We know everybody's cars, right? So if you put if somebody built a building across the street and with no parking at the bottom, those people, I'm gonna say, if you put a 200 apartment building, at least 100 people are gonna have cars, at least. Those 100 cars are gonna be spread out throughout the community, which is gonna cause mayhem because there's gonna be no parking. I have parking, I have drivers, I don't care about nobody's parking. But we gotta be mindful about the people that live in our little communities that really look forward to parking their cars in front of their homes and not somebody from down the block that live in a big ass building coming here to park their cars here. So eliminating parking from a big development it makes no sense.
Well, and also Department of Sanitation initiatives are going to further reduce the available parking, right? The bins that are gonna sit in the street.
My point, so
Yeah.
so where people are gonna park it.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I don't know if Ted Weinstein's still on the call. Over a decade ago, Community Board 7 had a massive development project on Webster Avenue. People might be familiar with it, not too far from the precinct. And the developer was going to develop one building, one massive, to your point, 100-unit building. But he didn't want to do the parking requirements. So what did he do? He just split it and said, I'll do 40 in this one, 40 in this one. I'm doing affordable housing, parking not required. I have 2 separate entrances, and therefore, screw everybody. You try to park on Webster Avenue, anywhere.
Webster Avenue has one of the best bus lines in the Bronx, the BX41.
That's not the point though.
Yeah, I think, no, I think to this point, that's the problem because like we are in the Northeast. So a lot of times when I explain to people I live in the Bronx, I let them know that I live closer to Westchester. Like I can walk to Yonkers, I can walk to Mount Vernon. The reason why I say that is because if we're relying on our trains and buses for people, they're not going to accommodate everybody and everything. So one thing about New York City is that we're constantly going to Queens, Brooklyn, or wherever have you. But when you're in the north or in the top part of the Bronx, that's a 2-hour train ride, or that's a long commute. So for a lot of people, like for me especially, you know, I'm traveling personally for groceries in like Scarsdale, and my doctor's appointments is in Vice Lane. So there are people who do need cars, and I think that we're trying to push more into transit, right, with the congestion, and we have that, which is going to be a thing for people. Like we already know there's a lot of pushback. There's going to be a thing for people. So in our area, you have a lot of people that do take public transportation and may use the bike lane. But at the same time, we can't just kind of negate the people who are parking. So we have all these units and we don't have nowhere, or it's already getting a little bit tight to park compared to like the South Bronx, God bless them. I don't know why they have a car. But up the north here, and then we already have, what you call it, Ultimate Sky Park. We're already complaining about our trash not being picked up. And White Plains Road, like, I think what we're trying to not have is like everything just happening and then trying to figure out how to sweep it up later. Because like with White Plains Road right now, our transportation, how it looks right now, is just not feasible to what White Plains Road should look like. So I get it. I agree with you. We need to have more like the 41 bus line, but that even got changed. So up here from the North Bronx, we used to be able to take the 41 bus all the way up here, all the way down to Fordham Road. Now we can't do that anymore. I have to take the 39 bus to the 41 bus to get all to catch it to go all the way to Fordham Road. So I think that we have to understand how the New York City public transportation works and then how the car situation works, because we need both of them.
Well, we have a question.
That's Tony.
You want to get it finished because of the.
Oh, go ahead. Look, Tony, I think I had a similar question to you about that.
I don't have a question.
Oh, no, her question is there anything?
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
Builders from including underground or first level parking, which I think was the same question that you had. Bobby.
Sort of, it's a bit of a different question, but go ahead, planning, do you see that question? Is there anything in the proposal preventing new builders from including underground or first level parking? And I think the answer is no. Planning can answer it.
Question is optional.
It's optional. But my point is only, if I have a choice, if I'm a builder, okay, I want to make money, okay? So if I can sell another apartment for $700,000 versus maybe increasing the value of one apartment by adding a parking spot, 50, 100, maybe $150,000, I'm going to take the extra unit. Every time, 10 times out of 10. Now, if it's 9 times out of 10 in practice or 7 times out of 10 in practice, that's the information I was looking for planning. I didn't really get a direct answer on it. And I understand the idea is to provide housing, but I know for a fact in my neighborhood, we have physical, and I don't take part in these physical altercations, but there are physical altercations over parking. I had during the McLean Avenue parade, okay? You have cars all over the place. Literally, had my 2 neighbors fish fighting over a parking spot because one neighbor is parking in front of a hydrant in a way where there was enough distance where they could back up and save a second spot. It's not uncommon.
Somebody was murdered.
And I thought someone in Queens beat someone up with a baseball bat. Listen, parking is a very sensitive issue. You'll see when it snows, people put up parking cones. These are things that cause real serious problems in this district. Okay, parking disputes. I'm telling you, everybody, 239th Street and Woodlawn would be utopia. We would all join in hands and sing together in harmony if it wasn't for parking. Parking literally is just the one issue that turns brother against brother. More than anything else, more than religion, more than race, more than, politics.
We have to talk about the state, and this is some required. Something.
No, I think that.
Some zoning sections allow, states clearly in zoning, permitted.
This is the problem with this, just like it was with the city economic opportunity. This is the broad brush that eliminates and it basically makes plain language of the zoning text all across the city.
But if we could say yes, but
that's
committee board 12 North Beach Bronx,
we have to make
100%
recommendations.
the rest of the city, y'all deal with it.
But we have to make those recommendations based on what's happening within our district and the needs of our district. That's what we have to sit down and do now.
Well, let's talk about making a final recommendation when we're ready to do a final
Yes.
recommendation. Go ahead. One more comment from inside.
A question so this presentation has been speaking about units from 3 to 5 stories. Is the parking only for that? Like, is there a max? Anyone?
Yeah, it makes it optional.
Got it. Okay.
Anything.
Okay.
Go ahead with the presentation.
Sure, yeah, and no, I definitely hear you. Parking is incredibly sensitive and very important. That's one of the things that DCP was looking at. Looked at a bunch of different cities around the country that have, done similar rulings on their parking, and developers, still build parking, and there hasn't been this ill effect to the quality of life in the studies that we've seen. So absolutely, I hear you. Parking is important. I am in the Bronx as well. I know it is incredibly important and can really make or break someone's day. So these are the additional changes to enable housing. The first one would be to enable conversion of underused buildings. So this is about adaptive reuse regulations across the city. The eligibility date is 1961, which is when the zoning resolution was last updated. We would up that by 30 years and make it 1991. So buildings around that time, good for conversion. We would also reintroduce small and shared apartments, and this would remove some arbitrary zoning rules to allow for them in central locations, easing the pressure off of family units, because a lot of times, as I'm sure people on the board know, there are three bedrooms for a unit. Instead of family being able to take those units, people, 3 individuals making different incomes all come together versus a family which is dependent on one income. And lastly, to eliminate barriers to contextual infill. And this would allow new contextual housing on sites in non-contextual districts, including campuses and irregular sites. So all of these changes that I've gone over are have implications for all of New York City, but in each community district, they can be quite small. This goes along with what we're talking about with CHL, a little bit of housing in every neighborhood and different housing types for the different needs that New Yorkers have. This is to, as I've said, take pressure off of some of the community districts that have been producing an inordinate and disproportionate amount of housing versus other community districts that have not been producing as much housing, and also to just reconcile some of these exclusionary zoning rules that have made it very difficult to generate housing and housing of different types throughout New York City. So that concludes my presentation. Just wanted to focus on this like really quick. This was referred out April 29th, and we are within the 60-day review. So this is, since we're within the 60-day review, this is when members of the Department of City Planning are coming out to community boards to present on the issue. So I will stop recording. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop recording. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if there are any questions, please let me know.
Does anyone have any actual questions, not statements about what you think about the proposal? Actual questions, go ahead.
Is bike parking still gonna be required? Bicycle?
So, oh no, I know what bike means. I don't believe that this touches bike zoning, bike parking at all, right? Well, but yeah, doesn't touch it at all. So we would not mess with any rules that are currently in place for that.
But the city is exploring bike parking.
I have questions about them.
Okay, Beatrice has a question.
Brenda, what is the deadline? By when do we need to vote?
So the deadline for this is July 5th, which is a Friday, the first week in July.
But we have until next month.
Yeah,
July.
so
Well,
I can just say this. So part of what we had wanted to do was just come out to community boards sooner rather than later. That way, if you had some of these more like nuanced questions and had more things that you would wanted to ask us questions about or discuss, that you would have time for that and, you know, just be able to kind of, you know, do as we're doing tonight, like have a longer meeting and ask some of these questions. And you know, we can have to-dos on our side so we can get back to you with any answers to questions that come up that we're not able to answer right here.
Well, Brent, I'm just checking when our next month's meeting would be. It would fall on the 10th. Would city planning be willing to come back if we had additional questions that we thought of between now and then?
Sure. I mean, yes,
I
technically.
do my best to get you the question in advance so you have the answers for us when you.
Yeah.
I will come back for sure.
You want to wait that long or?
I mean, if we have the opportunity and there's a consensus where people want to wait.
And let me just, Brennan, there's no worksheet on this one like there was for economic development.
Oh, there is a worksheet.
There is a worksheet. I will share it with you, George, and other members of the committee. There is a worksheet on this.
We got it, fine.
With the last one that we gave people the opportunity to submit. Why not?
Right, so I mean, I think it's gonna be difficult for this committee to get a consensus on all of those items. Would it be permissible for us to take an up or down vote? I mean, which is obviously permissible, but then separately, you know, if me and Beatrice and George feel, you know, have some feedback on these issues, can we delineate that in this worksheet? You'll accept that. And then maybe Luke has some thoughts and he wants to delineate that on a separate sheet. Is that permitted, or do we have to speak as one voice?
So to the first part of your question, yeah, you can do an up or down vote. What we've seen generally with community boards is it's with conditions. So you know, you could, as a board, get together, fill out a sheet, but in terms of one or two conditions, I believe it has to be like one sheet because you are speaking as like one board. So then I feel like it gets a little dicey in terms of like, you have two sheets from a community board and, you know, you have people from the land use committee that say one thing, But then you have people from like environmental concerns that, you know, maybe say another, and counting the votes would get a bit dicey.
Any other, before we go to just kind of comments and our thoughts on everything, is anyone online who had a question for Brenna, who hasn't had an opportunity to ask questions?
Does Carl have any?
Carl, do you have any questions? No, okay. Anyone in the group here in person?
I'm
Luke,
wondering
go ahead.
if there are any topics tonight that we have consensus in liking. I know there's some hot spot things that we definitely, some of us don't.
I like the ADU.
You like the ADU? What about
I'm
the
You know
ADU?
what I'm saying? I'm about to put a nice apartment right there.
No, but it's a flat line, it's not, this.
No.
Huh?
Oh,
Think about how many ways.
No, it's gotta be five,
Yeah, that's 5
feet,
feet.
5 feet.
I'm not
5 feet from the line.
I'll knock that down. Knock that down.
I think
Ken has a,
What's that? Yeah,
we need more time.
let's head, speak.
Go ahead, Ted.
I just wanted to raise, you may have talked about, I get on to like 7:15, and that's about the vacancy rate and the importance of what that means here. I don't know how much you got into that. That's, you know, the vacancy rate, which was announced, I don't know, a month or two ago. You know, the city every 3 years does using the census, does a study. And it's quite voluminous. It talks about all types of things about housing. There's one main purpose of it legally, and that is that it becomes the justification for rent regulation. You know, in order to have rent control, rent stabilization, legally, there needs to be an emergency to be able to do that. And that emergency is defined as when there is less than a 5% vacancy rate, meaning that 5% of apartments at any particular time are available, are vacant and available for rent. Generally speaking, the vacancy rate over the years has been, you know, 4%, maybe 3 something. This year, when it came out, the vacancy rate for the city is 1.4%. For the Bronx, it's under 1, it's 0 point something percent. And what that means is that if you have, let's say, a 4% vacancy rate, and somebody is looking for an apartment, and forgetting about income levels and financial ability, 4% of the units out there are available that they could find. If it's only 1.4%, that means that there are many less units available, affordable. And when you break it down, as the study did, by income level, it found that for most income levels, the vacancy rate is under 1. For people of a higher, maybe people who make, I don't know, 200,000 or something like that, the vacancy rate was 3 point something, which is not very good, but it's much higher. But what that means is somebody who can afford, let's say, to pay $3,000, $4,000 a month rent, if they go into a building and that particular owner, let's say it's not rent regulated, and that particular landlord says, you know, I have to charge you $4,000 or $4,500, that person could say, well, you know what, I don't think I want to do that, and I'm going to go down the block where the guy's only going to charge me $3,500. But if you're someone who can only afford $1,500, let's say, and there's one apartment, there's one building in the neighborhood that's advertising that they have an apartment available, and you go into them and they say, well, I don't know what you can afford, but I have to charge $2,000. You may feel that you don't have much of a choice. You may have to take that. And that's what this is really a lot about, supply and demand, that the supply has not kept up with the demand. I know there are people who say, well, the population of New York has gone down. Well, I know the city planning census people dispute that. They feel that there was an undercount. But in a lot of our neighborhoods, Bronx District 12, in the last, say, 40 years, has gone up about 30 to 40,000 people. And so, and the supply has not kept up. And that's really what this is about. This is about, and there's one of the slogans of this whole initiative, is a little bit more in every neighborhood. If every neighborhood does a little bit more, will that solve the entire affordable housing crisis? No, but it'll certainly make a dent. And that's really what this is all about, is putting together a lot of different measures, a lot of different actions that can make somewhat of a difference. It ends up making a little more housing available that then gives people more of a choice.
I'm sorry to ask one more question, and because we were running out of time, but I looked at the annotated statute, and another thing, we didn't talk about this at all because it doesn't extensively apply to Community Board 12, but where it talks about office building conversions, there's a chart that seems to suggest that if we have a building, an office building, so let's say, for example, the Montefiore medical offices on Bronx Boulevard, and they decide they want to sublease their space, are they allowed to use that for community facilities with sleeping accommodations? In other words, shelters? Can we put the conversion? I'm curious what planning has to say, and if you can't bring this information today, maybe in the next meeting, about the conversion of those office buildings to the extent that that's going to be utilized or could be utilized for new shelters.
So shelters don't actually fall within our purview. So this would not be facilitating that.
Wouldn't be facilitated, I mean, but, okay, so you still have your.
Because, sorry, shelters don't, yeah.
As a zoning matter, the chart on, I think it's page 93, 790, whatever, it says group 3 community facilities with sleeping accommodations, where previously R1, R4 was not permitted for, community facilities with sleeping accommodations. It seems like under the proposal, it would be. So any information you can provide us on that might be helpful.
So yeah, no, as I've said, because shelters are like something separate from like what is within city planning's purview. I do remember hearing this question come up, so I can get back to you with an answer, but it is not within city planning's purview, but I can find.
I'll email you offline the language that kind of, I was reviewing it, and I'm like, what is this saying that office buildings can be converted into shelters? And then you come back in email and I'll share it with the committee. Yep. Okay. All right, I think that's it for questions. Does anyone have any final comments? Okay, I think the proposal is going to, go ahead, George.
I know you guys are anxious to leave.
No, but I've been amongst ourselves.
No, well, you can't use the open meeting, you can take them out.
No, but we need another session with,
Well, you need to take time on this.
that's what we're saying.
You need to take a lot of time. You need to have more questions for city planning. You raised an interesting point. I didn't see that with the R1 through R5. But I wanted to address something. I wanted to address 2 issues. One, we talk about affordability and families and all this stuff. The problem, Luke, and the problem city planning and the problem HPD is that most of the developments that we're discussing are really just studios and 1-bedrooms. They're not building family units. They're not building a majority of 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. Secondly, the city is not addressing the housing issue. You have about 22,000 vacant apartments in NYCHA alone, which would go a very long way to alleviating some of the issues that you're talking about housing. So instead of giving away a blank check to developers, we need to be mindful, and that's what we have now. Right now, we have, if somebody wants, just like that guy on 3901 East 222nd Street or White Plains Road, wants to rezone to get a bigger building, they have to come to the community board. So just like the city economic opportunity talked about wanting to revitalize storefronts, but we're very vague on actually how they achieve that. How are you achieving city planning or HPD the inclusion of building more 3-bedroom apartments, more Michelamas, more condos, so that we have home ownership opportunities here for our constituents, instead of letting Mark Stagg run rampant in our district and buying up all these properties and then turning them into shelters? Because that's what happened with 3477 White Plains Road. That's what happened with 743 East Gun Hill Road. That's what happened with 4519 White Plains Road.
That's what's gonna happen with.
That's gonna happen with a lot of districts. They come here, they put their properties on Housing Connect, they say it's 130% of AMI, they leave it vacant for a year or 2, and they say, oh, I can't market my apartment. DHS, will you please bail me out? And that's where we're left with all these homeless shelters. And then it leaves a big black hole when people are discussing my district, because that's why I don't have an Applebee's, or I don't have a Chuck E. Cheese, or whatever the heck it is, or a name brand supermarket, because when they look at my district and they look at the disposable or discretionary income, you're not getting anything. You're getting big black holes.
Well, and I think we also have to look at the whole proposal in the context of what other agencies are doing. So I think it was
You're absolutely right.
DSNY is estimating the loss of 150,000 parking spots across the city when they launch these new metal bins to reduce the rat population. Local law 97 is going to raise rents for everyone as landlords pass along the costs of converting oil heat to electric. So there are all these other agencies in the mix doing other things.
It's what Wayne brought up earlier. You're not building new schools to address this issue. Wakefield Village, which was predicated on building a school, basically said, F you, we're not building a school. That's number one.
Wasn't interested.
That's, yeah, correct, yeah.
I'm sorry?
The school construction authority said that they're not
It doesn't-
interested in building a school.
It's actually more than that.
If you believe that,
It's because.
I have a bridge to tell you about it. Now, if the city council wanted it, there would be a school there. It's as simple as that. You have all the leverage when you're doing city land use and you're doing. You don't have all the leverage when you give it away. Well, hold on. I want to address Carla's point.
Want to speak?
Yeah, no, you've had your opportunity. You will get it. You're a board member. I don't get to vote. So you, all right, so you'll get your opportunity to speak. So the other issue I was going to raise, that I've not spoken about, is flooding. This district never used to suffer from that. But we've had rain events in the last 5 years, especially in the last 8 years, where Barnes Avenue has been flooding. Now you're talking about increasing the density of the housing over here, and you're not talking about increasing the trunk mains or the water mains that are in the sewers.
So you're saying more concrete will lead to more flooding?
We're always talking about.
You're going from 1 or 2 toilets in a 1 or 2 family house to 30 toilets in a 5-story building.
But guys, we are always talking about that. We need our congressman here to continue that conversation. Federal funding to be able to address infrastructure.
Well,
That's
that's
what
the
we need.
city.
I did watch that city council again.
We can't vote today. We still have a
We're
time.
not going to vote, but I just want to give everybody an opportunity to say something. That's not.
We should be before the loop. Let's speak as well.
Well taken.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
Luke,
I
go ahead.
brought this slide here because it shows that, our city's growing, right? You have kids, your kids have kids, they need a place to live. If we don't build housing for our kids' kids, they're gonna move out. This is why New Jersey is doing better than us on housing. More people are moving to New Jersey. than
You're better because you just.
Where we're not building housing, what does that do to our neighborhood? That makes our young people not live here. It makes our families have to split up. How many people do we know that have raised kids that can't live here when they're older because there aren't any housing? And look at the pressures as this map show. The outer districts aren't doing enough. It's putting a lot of pressure on these middle of the city where there's good transit access. It's great, but we want to have our communities sustained. How do we have good character of our neighborhood? We talk about the buildings of our neighborhood. That's great. We want to have all buildings look perfectly the same, don't change anything. But what about the people? If the people are changing, and if we keep on getting our family houses built up, bought out by people who can afford it, Ted brought up a good point. If you've got somebody who can afford a $4,000 apartment, what's stopping the one single-family homeowner down the street from selling their home to some guy from Westchester who wants to live here? Keeping building stock as it is doesn't keep the community together. Keeping the community together means building places spaces where people, a growing community can live. And that's what this does, and that's what we actually need. And George brings up a lot of good points. We're gonna need more sewer infrastructure. We're gonna need better public transportation.
And larger,
It's my,
more better.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
one
Why
better
does the
family.
family only come every 12 minutes on the weekends? We can have places to go on the weekends. We need more investment entirely. But
Ownership opportunities.
ownership, sure. Zoning, let's slip it in a
Let's
red.
be recognized.
And big.
I think Wayne had a comment. Did you have a comment? No.
I want to ask, 2 points. The minimum wage is like $16 now, or is it still $15?
15.
So that's like $30,000. I didn't see like that, income wasn't in.
It was like 1,000, the rent would be like 1,000 for family of three.
No, that was $40, 39. So that's way higher than what it was somebody working 40 hours a week. They can't afford even 30% of the income. So like,
The AMA equation doesn't work for us here in this district.
right.
We need a different equation.
So that was the question. Will they be, if someone makes minimum wage, working 40 hours a week, will they be included in this deeply affordable conversation? And then the other one, right? Yeah, so the other one is the ADU slide. There was something that said 2 stories. So is that 2 family? Is it maxed at 2 stories? Can 3 families have?
Stories, 800 square feet.
It was above the constant.
Two stories, 800 square feet. One family. But I mean, I don't know, can you bring 4 boarders into a 800 square foot ADU? I don't know. Sounds like you can.
So the 80, all right, so a height limit of 2 stories, okay. So 3, I live in a 2-story, 3 family. Can they have an ADU? It's 2 stories, but it's 3 families.
Yeah.
It depends on the lot. I mean, there was,
So as
there-
long as it's,
You see the second on the top right.
right.
Yeah, it
Two-
depends.
Yeah, if you have the 30-foot rear yard, which is what you mostly have, you have to have the clearance 5 feet behind the ADU.
yep,
10 feet for the next building,
Right.
so you can
Limited
do
2
it.
stories, limited 25 feet, 5 feet from the lot line, 10 feet between the detached ADU and other buildings. Permitted
Wait.
structure.
The ADU has to be detached.
No, it doesn't have to be detached, but if it is detached, it's gotta be more than 10 feet away from the structure, from the main structure.
That's a
Way from there.
Right.
The way.
And, yeah, so, and you only get 1 ADU per building. So you can't have the attic and the basement.
Yeah. And yeah, it also depends on if the house is
Well,
attached to
there's
buildings.
no point, unless I guarantee that the ADU isn't going to be a market rate rent that most of the people that we're trying to create housing for can't afford.
In this district.
And listen,
I think that goes to George's point about Mitchell Lama buildings, about housing projects.
these opportunities, I see this all the time. I mean, this is my job, this is what I do for a living, so I'm always reading stuff and I'm always looking at these things. I've used Housing Connect. I mean, I know that you're a city employee as well. You've seen this. You know, I know you're a big proponent of housing, but the housing that they're building is not for us. So, they're filling, not. They're not building it for the kid that's coming out of college. Because I have 2 college boys. I live in Co-op City. I live in a Mitchell Lama. You know what makes Co-op City beautiful? Space, the greenery. You know what makes that 30-foot behemoth next to where you live beautiful? The scenery, the pool, the greenery, the trees.
Okay, well, let me tell you something else about that, because there's a probably about 100-foot brick wall with barbed wire wrapping around 213.
You can talk to your fellow board member about that. She's the president of the.
Okay, so we have
Go ahead.
up to 2, 3 stories like above things, right? For instance, like we always have like noise complaints, people are like, my thing is that like there has to be certain situations where we can have the extra housing, because I agree with Luke, like we need the extra housing. But I think in other terms that we need to preserve the 1 family kind of thing, because everything's always our district, you know, if we have to put this in this district. I'm not too sure what the other districts are doing, you know, like, is this a proposal that's happening in, you know, the Pelham and all these other stuff, or they put it in extra house, like it's citywide? But my thing is that I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a bit of pushback when it comes to the other districts, right?
Because that's why I'm giving the city planner to the comps and come here.
So,
Eastern Queens, we know where Eastern Queens is.
Well, then,
We don't know where the Bronx. That's, you know, where, I mean, you know where Eastern Brooklyn, South Brooklyn is gonna be,
We should know that, and my thing is just about that is just that we have to keep like, you know, to the point of the family thing, if you're gonna keep families here, you know, yeah, like all my friends, they moved out of here because there is no family thing here, but it's not because like that 1-2 bedroom thing, that's not what they want. So my thing is that what kind of like multi-family houses, 2-family houses, or 1 single-family houses are we gonna have left? Because the only spaces that I think that people should like go to, like if I'm talking to somebody outside, is like a Staten Island and the Queens. They have greenery, they have space. We have limited of that. And if we're changing every lot into certain things like that, that's gonna change the trajectory. So do that, have those 2-3 family houses, but understand where it is. Because if you're putting it on Gun Hill Road, that is noisy. That's supposed to be like something, a big development, right? So now, yeah,
There's 3 new buildings.
there's 3 new buildings, so then that's
One thing about no greenery, right? The buildings you love, these, you know, 2-story, 3 small story apartment buildings, a lot of these were built before parking mandates. I've got a building next to me, they've got 40 or 50 things of parking. They had so much parking, they didn't even build any green space. It's just blacktop in the backyard. And that's because of parking mandates. A lot of these
To be
buildings.
fair, you know what building you're talking about? 761?
No,
Which one?
I'm not gonna give the address.
It's the only one there. It's your building, 761, and then Tilden Towers.
That's
And
not
the middle one is a shelter, so, you know, like, it was built no, it's not anyway, you gotta make the details
Yes.
right. You make these statements like, oh, there's no concept of shelter.
It was built as a normal affordable housing.
Exactly, which is why the parking was required. And then the developer said, F that, we're gonna turn it into a shelter because I can get more money as a shelter.
I mean, that doesn't change the fact that the backyard is just blacktop because of parking
But
mandates.
if the building had been developed as the true purpose, then parking would not have been required because that's what zoning dictates. But the developer tried to be cute, and that's my point. It's the same conversation that we had with 233rd Street, with 743. All of these developments were built with parking, and then they were flipped and took homeless shelters, and now parking is irrelevant. And so your point is actually well taken. Like, why do you have parking when nobody is gonna own a car in this shelter?
And it was under the disguise that now nobody could afford it. We can't rent them out, so now we have.
But the thing is, so
I think some of us just like Trump developers, you know?
Yeah.
Like for me, developers is with the church aspect, as I said before, I saw it happen in Harlem. So in Harlem, it's that happening, and then I just saw, like, we just had an example of looking at a church's lot, and we're just like, oh, in theory, this is doing goodwill, and it's like, well, why would that be plausible for us to take space from a church, or to just build a house on top of a church because we can? Like, you know, those things, it worries me only because certain developers take advantage of the fact that certain people cannot afford their property taxes, that whatever. So in that incentive, you know, you kind of take that option because it's like you want to be existing around. I just think that, as you said, there has to be parameters. There has to be just extra stuff.
By art.
Why don't we, why don't we set a public hearing? Let's have a public hearing.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we just agree that we're all gonna study this issue? We're gonna have an opportunity to email our questions to planning and resolve some of the issues.
Email them to me, and we'll send.
Okay, then we'll send one major email
But
with
let's have
all
a
the
public
questions.
hearing as well. We should have a public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
Public hearing? What do you mean public hearing?
There's no public hearing. There's plenty white tiger now. We just not,
Where we get the opportunity to have
It's not
the
even-
residency.
Well, I mean, people come to the full board meeting and
they will.
Okay.
You still know that we can invite me, the Woodlawn taxpayers meeting meets the same night as our land use meeting. But they had somebody, I don't know where they were from, but they were talking about this very issue, city of yes, housing opportunity. So Kira was texting me while we were having our meeting. She's like, oh, when is your meeting? So they have every intention of coming. But that's what I'm saying. I know you guys want to run out of here, but this is the point I made at the last full board meeting, this is the point that Bobby's making now. Read this. This is our job. This is the only thing, I think, in my opinion, we should be doing. We're a planning board. This is zoning. This is exactly what we should be doing. Read this stuff. To Luke's point, and the final thing I'll say, I agree with you, Luke. The ZQA MIH that they did for White Plains Road, that's fine. It's understandable. But you haven't had the explosion. You made that point earlier of development. But what you're doing with this citywide is that citywide is saying, you guys are irrelevant. We're going to automatically allow for these things to happen instead of giving us. And I know that that's a problem because under our previous chair, we were very anti-development. So, but the thing is, we were advisory anyway. The reason we were good is because we were serious about this stuff. We considered every option. And I will say that this will be my last point. Fight the economic opportunity. The majority of community boards citywide voted against it. So don't listen to any hoopla that there were a lot of points that were taken, and the city council is weighing in. Now, the city council has had meetings with community board members. I went to one where Council Member Dinowitz had one. And he had people, this is what I'm saying, they're city planning. It was virtual. Everybody got the invite. That's why I raised the point. All the stuff that they wanted in economic opportunity that was probably the worst part of the economic opportunity is not happening. So the commercial and residential neighborhoods is not happening. There are other things, I don't remember all of the details, but they're not happening. As city planning, they're still working out all of the details. But I will say that this is the disingenuous part of the city. They know that the community boards go on hiatus for the summertime. We've long, before I got here, about them certifying these projects, and then, well, the deadline's in August, or in this case, July 8th. That leaves us, you just introduced it in late April, the last day of April. We're now in our May meeting. We're going to have another May meeting. They're paying lip service to you. So this is your opportunity. Get all the stuff you want, and then we're going to table the next meeting. Maybe we'll have our council member here.
What about sending this to the board? Remember,
I think what we're going to do is we're going to vote on this as a committee, and then we're going to make a recommendation to the full board, and the board will give us a yay or nay. Now, if we can get a consensus on we like this aspect, and this aspect, and not that, I think that's probably unlikely, but I think the board can kind of talk amongst each other between now and the next meeting, and we can see if maybe we can bang out some sort of consensus on that. But otherwise, I think we come back on June 10th. We're going to have this discussion very, more expeditiously, and then we're going to have a vote.
No, not expeditiously. Everybody gets the opportunity to speak.
Opportunity to speak, but I mean, it's not going to be another presentation. We can ask additional questions. Additional Q&A, make your final points, and then we're going to vote.
So we're having them come back June 10th.
Right. Well, that's to Bobby's point. If you want to send it all to Bob, you want to send it all to Ursula and myself, send us the questions. We will send it to city planning. City planning will come back. Maybe not a presentation, but they'll have answers.
Right. Okay. Is anything else?
No, I just want to say something.
Okay. Thank you so much, city planning, for your presentation and for entertaining our questions and for your thoughtful responses.
Just really quickly, wanted to jump in to make sure that everybody knows about kind of the full spectrum of opportunities to weigh in. Brenna, did you want to jump in on that?
Sure. So I had said earlier towards the beginning of my presentation that the review for community boards would end on July 5th. And then the proposal moves on to the City Planning Commission. But we can transmit your recommendation as long as it's received before the City Planning Commission votes.
Yeah, I'm sorry with the city.
Brenda, you know that for economic opportunity, the borough president's office was already making votes before the community board did. And they
Yes.
voted to support it, whereas the majority of Bronx boards did not.
Yes.
We know.
Okay, do I have a motion? Second, okay.
I just want to say something real quick.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to say something.
Good night.
Good night.
Stop recording. Stop.